Hey folks, welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. I'm John Najarian, Pete Najarian here with me as well, of course. And we are right now looking at the stock market, seeing what kind of top stories we should bring to you. And we thought we would start off with one that is perennially an interesting stock to talk about, Pete. WWE, Vince McMahon's company, but no longer headed by Vince McMahon.
Yeah, Vince McMahon's taking a walk, John. He's been there a long time. He's been very controversial. He's been a guy who's not afraid to make the press get a little bit nervous on what he might say. But that's who he is. He's this guy who's out there and he's pushing what it is he's pushing, which is the greatest franchise in wrestling history, and it's unbelievable what they've built. But I think, John, because of a lot of the different reasons that you and I, know about Vince McMahon and some of what he's done in his career, I think that's partially why him stepping down is why we're seeing this stock start to make a really catapulting move to the upside. 52-week highs, right?
Yeah, exactly right, Pete. And it's nearly a $6 billion company. Obviously, nothing else in the entertainment space except for the UFC comes close. And in fact, that's about how much the UFC traded for, Pete. And I think that with McMahon here, you've got a problem because he has had high profile issues with ladies. We're not judging him, but I think it's a lot tougher for a guy that's got charges. I don't know if he's ever been found guilty, Pete, but if he's got that sort of thing hanging over him, I think that's why as soon as you take him off and you just run with this fantastic entertainment giant, you see why a big streamer like Amazon, even Disney, could be interested. And Loop Ventures, our friend Courtney Gibson and her firm, Loop, they just gave it a big upgrade today, and it hits a new 52-week high.
I got to throw a shout out too. I got a guy, Madcap Moss, John. He was a linebacker at the University of Minnesota, 6'3", 245-pound kid. Wonderful guy. Mike Rallis is his real name, but I'll tell you what, he's a lot of fun. He does an amazing job, and he's part of that SmackDown. There's all these different parts of the WWE that I think sometimes people are not fully aware about that, but they are an amazing, and the eyeballs that they can pull and all the different areas. The exposure they've got is absolutely incredible. Speaking of exposure, how about when we look at what's going on in coal, John? Yeah, I said coal and coal prices because, that was something in the past, it seems. But now all of a sudden we're taking a look and we're getting some really interesting moves right now. Consol Energy, big move to the upside. There's a variety of reasons, but it's thermal coal. It's all these other types of things. And what do you think, John? Because when I look at coal, our first thought, it seems like, always goes to, well, you know what? That's another energy source. How about the fact that they're part of the steel industry? And we all know what's going on there. So what do you think right now? Is this thing, it's definitely making a nice move, but what do you think?
Well, Pete, the first two stocks we've talked about, both hitting fresh 52-week highs. Yep. This one's a $2 billion player that, when you knew that Joe Biden was becoming president, you would have never thought that you'd see this because, of course, he's a green energy guy. But because of the sanctions, I want to be clear. I'm not a fan of Vladimir Putin. I'm just pointing out that it's not Vladimir, it's the sanctions against him that are causing all these shortages around the world of energy. That's only going to be getting worse, Pete, into the winter. And Germany has already said that they will pick human beings and homes over businesses, which means businesses might have to close for several days a week. That's going to be pretty bad for Europe if indeed you have business shutting down for 3 days a week or whatever it amounts to. If they have a cold winter, Pete, it's really going to be tough. I like this play right now because bituminous coal, you've already said some of the other applications. This is just a great environment for them. And again, I'm not trying to make it political with Putin or Biden.
No, and it's steel production too, John. I mean, I think that is such a big element that a lot of people look past that, and they always look at just the energy side of it. But you look at the steel, and we know what kind of demands are out there. This is a stock that actually, even at 52-week highs, probably has a little bit more room to the upside potentially. based upon that whole thing. How about Weber, John?
Yeah.
You know, when you say Weber, a lot of people didn't even know this is a publicly traded company, but wow, this is kind of interesting because talk about a company that's struggling. Why are they struggling so bad right now, John?
Well, Pete, it's supply chain, but it's industry wide. It is not just them. So in other words, we're seeing Traeger, Pete. You know, I've got a Traeger grill. I love it. It basically automatically pulls with this auger. It pulls in pellets into the grill, keeps it at just the right temperature. I mean, it's very high tech. But Traeger just announced big layoffs. Weber's having to do layoffs. The stock is just tanking, and the CEO's stepping away. So all of those things are bad for Weber. I guess we're not barbecuing as much, Pete, or people, rather than trading up to a better grill like a Traeger or a nicer Weber, are stepping away and saying, no mas, I'm sticking with this old monster in the backyard rather than a new one.
And you know, John, I think that's exactly what they're doing. They're just stalling the next purchase. And I think that hurts Weber. Obviously, they need that turnover if they can get it. Maybe they're making the grills too good. Maybe the steel is too strong. I don't know what it is, but they certainly are doing something on that side of things right. What they're doing really, really wrong. Look at the debt that these guys have got with the cash flows and everything else. My goodness sakes. There's a reason why it's got a huge short interest in this stock. It's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
But what do you throw on those grills, John?
Well, I'll tell you what you're not throwing on them, Pete. Beyond Meat.
Yeah.
Beyond Meat is beyond beat. This thing is just getting hammered. Beyond Meat is trading to the downside hard.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is that Bloomberg last week sort of pontificated. They didn't say that they had inside knowledge of this, but they pontificated that, hey, maybe they're not as solid with Yum Brands as a lot of people thought. And if that's the case, biggest restaurant brand in the world, Pete, that's not good for them.
Yeah. Well, the demand, John, when you see this, you know, it was a great idea years ago because everybody wanted to go that direction. It's a little bit like with this whole conversation on coal. Everybody says, well, we're going to get rid of coal. Everybody goes to Beyond Meat because no one's going to eat meat anymore. Well, I don't know about everybody else, but I can see meat prices going up. Demand is there. What the demand is not there for is the fake meat. And these guys have themselves in a bit of a box right now. And I think that's going to be a major issue going forward.
Yep. And then, Pete, I want to hit unusual activity because I know a lot of the people that tune in for the shows tune in for what you and I see as far as unusual option activity. You don't have to be an option trader to pay attention to what we're seeing. And what we're seeing is a lot of call buying. A call buy is something that's bullish, folks. So in other words, if you were to act on what I'm talking about, you would say this is a bullish outcome for this particular stock, Delta. So Delta Airlines, Pete, they buy 10,000 of the September 35 calls. 10,000, since every call represents 100 shares of stock, a 10,000 lot is a million share purchase. That's big. You know, somebody buying a million shares of that is really something you want to pay attention to. And so Delta was 31 bucks when they were buying those. These are $4 above the market. So a lot of people, if they trade options, will buy a lower strike, sell a higher strike. We all kind of get that. If you're new to options or never want to trade options, you're probably just buying the stock because we know people are returning to the air. We know that the prices are jacked up higher than the planes are flying, Pete. I'm paying double for most of my flights right now that against what I was paying a year ago. That's good for Delta, American, and United.
Well, I'll tell you what, I continue to see certain spots in energy where we are seeing a lot of activity, John. This one today is really interesting. Petrobras, PBR, not Pabst Blue Ribbon, Petrobras. Now, this is Brazilian oil and gas and all the rest of it, right? So on Friday, we had some monster buyers in there, John. 59,000 of the November 14 calls are getting bought. They were spread off. Don't worry about that. They were buying the 14 calls, 59,000 of those. Well, they decided to come right back today, and they bought 40,000 of the January 14 calls for about 50 cents. So 40,000 today, 59,000 on Friday. Stock's making a nice little bit of a move to the upside. It's one of the areas in energy that has not really worked all that well. Some of it probably having to do with the strong dollar and everything else. But it looks like somebody out there seems to think that this is a stock that has a little bit more upside, maybe a lot more upside in the coming months. They're going out to November. They're going out to January. So that tells me that they're not looking in the immediacy, but they're definitely looking out into the future to say, you know what? Petrobras has got a shot to finally start to shine to the upside. Speaking of shining, tell us about the quarterbacks, John.
All right. Pete, I love this one because Pete has a radio show, folks, every Sunday. It's called The Sports Huddle. He does it with Maxie, and Pete and Maxie spend 2 hours just breaking down stuff and going over lists of favorites or least favorite. Favorites quarterbacks, Pete. Top three, Brady, Russell Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers. And the reason I picked those, Pete, was pretty simple. Those are the guys I'd least like to face if I had a 2-minute warning and a 2-minute, if they have the ball at the end of the game, 9 times out of 10, they're going to beat you. One time you might stop them, but they're going to march that team. And, it's really just up to a mistake being made by a snap or a receiver. Other than that, those 3 quarterbacks would be the ones I would least like to face. So that's why they're my top 3.
Well, I don't disagree with you, John, but the only one that I would maybe push out of that top 3 and maybe put a couple other names to think about would be Russell Wilson. And I only say that because of age, and I've watched him. He was a much better player, I think, 3-4 years ago than he is now. You know who continues to get better, and he's really young? I'll tell you what, Joe Burrow is pretty amazing. And I'll tell you what, Josh Allen, I am so impressed with that kid. He's big. He's as big as a tight end. He can run like a running back, and he can run over you like a tight end. And he's just got that size and that arm. I just look at some of these young guns. And speaking of young guns, I'm going to give you my top 3 wide receivers, John. And let's see. You can push back because you might not agree. There's a lot of great receivers out there. Davante Adams is my number 1. Now, this guy's been amazing for 8 years, 8 seasons with Aaron Rodgers, absolutely just destroying defenses week after week. He doesn't have anybody on the other side of him. They don't have a huge, they've gotten better on the running game finally, but for a long time it was Aaron Rodgers and him. Well, now he's back with his college quarterback and Derek Carr from Fresno State. I think with the Raiders, these guys are going to be something really, really fun to watch as they get through the season. My next one is Justin Jefferson. Now, it's not a homer call because he's a Viking. The reason I put Justin Jefferson there is this. He has the most yards in the first 2 years of any wide receiver ever in the NFL. Now, that has to say something. And a lot of people say that his quarterback's not even very good. I disagree with them. But if he has a bad quarterback and this guy's already setting records and he's going to go after Randy Moss's 3-year record this coming year, he goes over 4,000 yards, John. He's going to actually eclipse and go past one of the greatest, maybe the greatest receiver ever, in my opinion, with Randy Moss. That would be something. Jamar Chase is my last one. I love this kid, and I love the fact that they did exactly what we're seeing out there in Vegas. They're in Cincinnati. We've already got Joe Burrow, and he says, get me my wide receiver from LSU. And so they did exactly that. They got Jamar Chase. This kid can play with the very best of them. He's unbelievable. He's speed. He's got hands. He's got great feet. I think those receivers are a lot. We could argue all day, but those 3, I'll tell you what, I would love to have any of those 3 on any team that I was a fan of.
I agree. And Jefferson and Chase, Pete, I think are absolutely going to be, if they stay healthy, those guys are going to be breaking records for years. Yep. Folks, we appreciate you tuning in to the Rebels Edge. Make sure you send us some love, retweet if you don't mind. And we'll be back with more Rebels Edge this week. I'm John Najarian. He's Pete Najarian. We thank you for joining us today. Have a great one, everybody.